got another speaker, man.
Try to get us out of here, man.
What are you talking about?
Okay. Don't kill me. Hey, I'm allowed to make mistakes, right? I don't even know his name. All right, we got another speaker here. So, Justin L. Help me welcome Justin L.
I'm an addict, Justin. I'm glad there's spotlights so I can't see all you out there, but I wanted to first thank the convention committee for asking me to come out, and also the Champlain Valley area. I guess real quick, I know this is a dick move, but if all the convention committee members could stand up quick so we can thank them. So I just had a couple quick requests. I'm horrible at public speaking. I get really nervous and I say a lot. So I wanted to ask a couple quick requests for people that are here who have different experiences than I do, different spiritual paths, different drugs of choice, all those things that are making us different, making you different, making me different. In the spirit of anonymity, which is the foundation of our program, I'd like to ask you just to block that shit out for a bit and let me talk. And maybe you'll learn something. So, and on the other side of that, in the same spirit of anonymity, those of you who are here lying about your clean time, high right now, thinking this program's not going to work for you, block that shit out too, because you're not alone. I'm not high right now. You're not alone. Most of us have been down that road. So, and turn off your fucking phones. You're going to distract somebody who needs this shit. So, I swear, I don't know if I mentioned that yet, but I swear, my story's got, it's got violence, and it's got rage, and it's got drugs, and it's got all sorts of dysfunction, but it's also got recovery, and it's got equal balances of focus and dedication and complacency and backsliding. So I continue to work on that, and actually this opportunity has really helped me to plug in like I needed to be over the last long time. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity. So the spirit of anonymity is how I wanted to start. When I came in, I really was confused about what that meant. I thought it just meant confidentiality, and that's important because we weren't able to congregate as using addicts or as addicts under the Rockefeller laws at one time, and we were subject to arrest and things like that. So now having this and having it grow in all the languages and countries and things that we are privileged to be a part of, we still have to look at that confidentiality. Although Facebook makes it clear what our last names are, we need to still focus on people's confidentiality and the anonymity, but also beyond that, anonymity is not, it's being one, it's recognizing those similarities and not the differences. So we all got the same problem and the same solution, and that's addiction and recovery. So that said, is this thing really doing a lot of feedback? Is this better?
No.
It's my pacemaker. That better?
Speak up.
Okay. So thanks. I'm going to do a bunch of stuff that's not going to be on tape behind the podium. So when so I'm going to start back in my story. I'm really going to try to focus on the solution and really try not to say things that are triggers for people. I know that abuse and drug use and things like that are prevalent in our stories, and so I think part of that anonymity is going to be for me to focus not on specifics. I really try in meetings to share general terms, and I think that's important, that we're not saying things that unique other people out the door and make people feel different, whether it's in our spiritual paths or our beliefs. We don't want to violate the traditions by talking too much about one part of a dogma or one type of drug. So I'm going to really focus on that, but drugs are part of my story, and this isn't a meeting. So, and you've asked me to come up here and talk about my story. So, you ever get that feeling when you walk into a meeting and you think everybody's looking at you? That's where I am right now. All right. Yeah. So I learned very, very young in life that putting something between me and my feelings worked, and I found those things. From a very little dude, I found those things. I found ways to participate in drama and escape and oblivion and all sorts of things before I found drugs. Then when I found substances, I was very young, and it was a cool thing. And little dude, like babysitters had White Crosses and diet pills and Doan's back pills and whatever I could grab. I did, and it made us feel funny, and we had a good time with it, and cigarettes, and a lot of the things that I started to put in place to separate me from my feelings carried me through and to the point that I was able to block out a lot of the pain, because there were huge parts of my life that were centered in my fears, my anxieties, my pain. I just lived that way. That's how I lived. I don't remember not being anxious and having complete lack of faith. And then as that stuff progressed into finding ways and means to block that out, it turned into a whole nother set of character defects. I used escape, I used dishonesty, I used all these things that I still use now at a higher degree, or I still use in my active addiction as a higher degree. But as a kid, I learned quickly that lying worked, and I learned quickly that changing a story around worked, and that I could participate in drama, and that gave me something, or it protected me from something, and that became the path of my life, where either I got something from something, or something protected me from something else. So I learned how to do that, and my life continued to be full of trauma and abuse and things like that added to that. I had to have those things to escape. I had to have those things to protect myself. So fast forward a little bit, I figured out how to manipulate situations, and nothing worked for long. And then when I found drugs, it was it. That was the thing that I could control. It was the thing that had an instant effect. It was the thing that fixed everything. So remember the first time that I legitimately did illegal substances, I could not wait to do the next one. I couldn't wait to try the next level. I couldn't wait to try the next method of administering it. We had the DARE program as kids, and they passed around like the plexiglass thing with the wooden block and all the little pockets. And I wanted to figure out how to get in there and how to, which ones I should have in the batter's box for next, because I had tried them. And so I'm just going to try to calm myself for a minute. So yeah, drugs worked for a minute, and they added, this level of acceptance that I needed from others. I needed to put up a wall of shocking. I needed to put up a wall of a facade so that people didn't see who I was, so people didn't see how I felt about myself. And drugs helped me with that. I was cool because I had something. I was cool because I could do more than anyone, or I could do less than anyone, or whatever. And between me and my little social group, I was the crazy one, and everybody knew that, you say something and Justin will do it. We're walking down the street and somebody goes, "Hey, you should put a brick through that window," and I'm putting a brick through that fucking window. Because that's who I was. I needed that, and I was impulsive, and that's what my disease is. I've got great instincts. I just have poor impulse control, and when you put in there the things I'm willing to do for protection, or I'm willing to do for acceptance and love and all these different things, I'll do what the fuck I need to do. And I learned that as a kid. So, when I found drugs, when I found the life that came along with that, I was in. It had its messy sides, but it was worth it. I learned quickly that the pain and the isolation and the dirty parts of our addiction, a thing we do, was worth it. And I had to pile on top of those things more and more and more, not just for the euphoria, but to cover up, the conflicts with how I wanted to be or how I should be. Eventually that perception slid over into that is how I am. So a huge part of my disease and my recovery is about perception. And the way that I viewed myself from being a little kid was different, wrong, bad, all those things. So I still do that, but I learned how to, as a kid, I learned how to use that as an excuse. looking back. In recovery, I look back at that now. Then it was very real. You know, when I looked at myself as bad, stupid, you know, whatever, all these labels I had been given, directly or indirectly, I needed to act that way. So I was told as a kid in school that, and they put me in the green group, which is like the dumb kids. And then I had to go out in the hall and read because I couldn't follow along, or I was always talking. And I mean, I latched onto that shit. I'm dumb. So I had friends who reinforced that, like, hey, dumbass. And, you know, we teased each other, but it was real to me. So whether anyone ever said to me, you ain't gonna amount to shit or not, that was my message. So that's what I was gonna do, you know. And when I found drugs, it was like, I'm not going to amount to shit, and I'm going to take your shit, and eventually I'm going to die, you know. That's how my life was heading all the time. And, you know, I didn't have a prediction what was coming next because it just needed to be oblivion. It needed to be comfortable. It needed to change. And I just ran like that. I ran and ran and ran. I ran from things that hurt, and I ran toward things that gave me oblivion. And you know, I'm never content anywhere. On the way there, I couldn't wait to get there. Once I got there, couldn't wait to leave. Just how I ran. So my perception of myself was off. And this disease, using, is about changing our perceptions, you know, and it's about changing the way we feel. And we have this illusion that we live under constantly. I do. You know, and mine is, that's the self-centeredness of this disease. The core of our disease is the self-centeredness, and that having to be that thing, be that label, be my perception of myself, you know, it drove me to that point of death or oblivion is better than how I see myself and how I believe that the world sees me. So, in that disease, I took myself to points with drugs that should not be unmanageable, like they're labeled in pamphlets and everything else to go. You know, before I got into harder drugs, I was just as fucking out of control and unmanageable, you know, with those things. And peers and people would say, "Oh, that's not addictive." And I mean, I'm an addict. Addictive for me can be peanut M&Ms and eBay. It doesn't matter. Yeah, I'm surrendering that shit right now. So when I found, you know, other drugs, other substances that the unmanageability was right instant, that fit even better into what I need, you know, because it was bam, instant, and that circle in the bowl death, that's what I crave. That circle in the bowl shit was right there, you know, that nitty gritty, gun in my face, my heart could stop, someone could shoot me, a cop could shoot me. That's what I started to crave. The other wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed to amp it up. And so I lived in that lifestyle, you know, for a long time. And again, the pain, the going against my values, that didn't matter. The things that I did, you know, the ways and means, they trampled over any slight amount of value that I had, which was already damaged. So all the ripping and running that we all know, I don't need to share about that stuff. You know, the stuff we did, the ways and means, those things aren't an important part of my story, but they're there. If you don't think I qualify, catch me after the meeting. I'll tell you about Christmas presents I sold and all that shit. But yeah, I did all those things that compounded my view of myself as a piece of shit. Because when I had those titles, I'm a thief, I steal, you know, I'm a cheat, I cheat, you know, all those labels I gave myself, I did them because I had them. And I never once had a label of, I have integrity, so I'm going to practice integrity. I didn't have that shit. And that's nobody's fault. You know, I'm not blaming the house I grew up in, I'm not blaming messages from TV or school or anything. It's just how I interpreted the stimulus around me and the world around me. Impulsively, I had to go right to me. And so any little thing, it was me. It was my negativity, and it was another reason, another excuse to self-destruct. So that's my disease in a nutshell right there. My recovery is a whole other story. So when I came to the point in my life that death was more desirable than continuing down the road I was on, I'd had enough. And I share about some of these things with people that I grew up with in recovery, and sometimes at meetings or sponsorship. And again, I don't need to get into too much detail about them, but I got to the point where my secretive life that I had always lived since a kid was just too painful. And I had a little pistol that I ended up breaking the firing pin, practicing in the mirror. And so I decided I needed to do something, because I couldn't have someone find me and call my mom, dead on the floor. So I'd been taken to an adolescent AA meeting, or an AA meeting as an adolescent, and those are our predecessors. And I have been strict and a fundamentalist before, and that's going to be part of my story coming up. But those are our predecessors. So I went to their meetings, and a couple, and I was like, no, I'm not doing this. They're these old people, and they shake hands and stuff, and there's no way. So plus, I didn't have a problem. And I sure as fuck didn't have a disease. So I wasn't doing that. I wasn't going to do that. The trajectory of my coming to terms had a whole lot of trials at moderation and trials at substitution and putting things between me and using, and just super creative shit. We're creative. Hiding money at my parents' house so I could only get it when they're at work, and just stuff that it worked a minute until it worked a minute. And the substitution thing, that worked. I danced around that for quite a number of years. I would give myself rationales as to why I could go back to those things, and they always led down the same path. And I've gotten to the point where I know, I've got a list. I get off track easily, and so here I go. I get off track easily, and here I go. Apparently, I repeat things over and over again too. I can use anything. I mean, really, I have to watch myself. I have to be very vigilant, because anything that gives me that little, I'll do. And right now I've got my things, but none of them are so unmanageable that I'm going to break a firing pin up against my head. I have a list of things that I can dabble with. I have a list of things that I have to abstain from. I have a list of things that I can do. But when the day I can't, I need to be vigilant about that. And I can't. This is a program of complete abstinence. And if you don't believe that, if you don't know what that means, if you need to talk to someone about maintenance program, those are all real things. And I'm not up here to talk about my opinion, but this is a program of complete abstinence, and we cannot live this program. We cannot fully work spiritual principles and get the steps for using. So we need complete abstinence to work this program. So anyway, I'm just going to calm down for one more second. I'm going to run back to my room for a few. So yes, seeking oblivion through any means necessary. Some things brought me right to the brink of that, and other things just kind of give me a little something to hold me over. So I'm not a book thumper, but I did bring my book up here mostly to hold on to. And I do have one thing I'm going to read at the end. So okay, I'm with you. So what was it talking about? I learned how to put things between me and my feelings. I learned quickly which things were unmanageable, and I made excuses to do the ones that I could get away with. So when I got to the point that I was ready to kill myself, because I had tapered off of drugs that were supposed to be a problem. A lot of the ones that, if I didn't do them, I was sick, or those type of the things that I had learned from the DARE program or rehabs or whatever, which was, or my friends, the feedback I got from my friends, which was that's natural and it can't affect you. Those all had the same results for me. They weren't as immediate, but at the end of the road, I still couldn't stand myself. So when I came to that point with circling the bowl of I can't do this on my own, my self-defeating inner talk was, that's because you're a piece of shit, and that's because you need to die, and that's where I went with it. It wasn't you need to change, it was you need to end this shit. So so I came to that conclusion a year or two after one of my attempts was to get into a relationship with someone who didn't use. And I remember the first time that we went out, shortly before I finished up everything I had, and we went out, and that was my beacon of hope that what I needed to do is get a change. I'd never been with someone who didn't use. I'd never been with someone that I didn't steal from, and they didn't steal from me, and we weren't willing to beat each other's ass for the next one. So I found someone who was, she was clean, she didn't use, she had no use for that in her life, and I figured this is it. And it wasn't. I mean, it brought right back that drive for secrecy so I did. I went right back to it. I struggle with myself because, again, there's a value that I'm contradicting. I believed I needed this for myself, and I couldn't do it. So I continued to try for the 6 weeks before I knocked her up. And so then, actually, I'm totally lying. It was 3 weeks. That's right. So then I had this new beacon of hope that this baby was coming along, and there is no fucking way I'm going to be that dad. I'm not going to use my kids in the car. I'm not going to run around and do that shit. I'm not going to let my kids see me high. Nope, because I'm not. And I set that value. I define that that's going to be a I'm never going to do. And my son was so I struggled. I put up a few days here and there, maybe 2 days here and there, but I wasn't able to stay clean during that time. And so my next goal was when he's born. When he's born, I will never use again. And he was born. And he was born with heart defects, but we didn't know that. And on 2 days old, he crashed and essentially died. His heart stopped, and he wasn't breathing. And we rushed him. Actually, we just happened to be in the emergency room parking lot when that happened. This is the longest story ever that I'm just going to wrap up in a little peanut shell here. He ended up pretty much dying in the parking lot, the emergency room, and they revived him. And they sent us to several different hospitals who, told us that, he's not going to make it. And they sent us to one other hospital, and he was on 36 wires and tubes and stuff, and they were going to do open heart surgery at 11 days old, and they had him all. We couldn't touch him. We could touch him. We couldn't pick him up, and all these things that, my idea of what a baby should be is not that little thing. And I wanted that. I wanted that more than anything. I needed this little cute thing that was going to give me a drive to not use. So I brought my pistol, and if he died, I was going to kill myself in the hospital. A different pistol. So I went and I just waited for it. I waited for this moment of doom, and then I had a sign. A nurse left a bottle of morphine and a spike in the sheets, and it was on. So I went back to the Ronald McDonald house, and I deserved that break today, and I took it over, and I did not hold up my value of being that parent and being that support for my family when things were as hard as they could ever be ever. So So I got out of that situation. He's fine. We went back home, and I couldn't stay clean. I mean, I did my best. I honestly did my best, but I just couldn't. And so again, that piled on top of the self-hatred. I had this ideal, this value that I was supposed to uphold. That was my perception of my situation. It was, I need to do this, and I couldn't. And that it became very clear that the negative talk, that voice in my head that told me what a piece of shit I was right. I couldn't live in conflict with that anymore. So on top of that, we were told that every year and a half he was going to have another open heart surgery, and there was that constant doom and gloom of, when is this going to happen? Is he going to die? And that was just too much. So I was not able to stay clean. I lived in that household in complete secrecy. I raised my kids. I had this secret life, and eventually it got to the point where, oh wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. So I got way ahead of myself. I did get clean around that time. I put my gun in my mouth, was going to blow my brains out, had a kid, had a wife, had my mom, or had my parents that I wasn't going to do that to. And so I decided to do some research and figure out how to do this right. And I knew about the 12 steps. And actually, the honest truth is that I needed one more thing to blame it on. So my plan was to go to the meetings for a little bit, and when that shit didn't work, that's it. I tried everything. So I ordered a book on Amazon, and I looked at it for 11 days, and that was the longest I'd stayed clean for a very long time. And I was sick. I was just sick, and so I went to my first meeting, and I came late, and I sat there, and I couldn't hear anything. I mean, honestly, none of it made sense to me. It was principles and steps and sponsor, and it was like what a dog hears, I'm just like, hearing all these things, and they would say something like, "You want to go out?" And I'm like, "Yes, I want to go out." There's like Charlie Brown's teacher, and was wah, 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 dope sick, and I caught, I knew that stuff. So I sat, and I came back a week later because I just assumed, once a week would be good for me. And so I did that. I think I went to 3 meetings, and at one meeting, right around my 30 days, I sat and shared like a good newcomer that for my 30-day anniversary, I was going to get rid of all my shit that I had at home. I had it all in a box, and I was going to take it and get rid of it. I had all my gear and some dope, and I could see the faces change, and so I'm thinking they're all going to be so proud of me. And it was like The Walking Dead. I mean, as soon as the circle broke, they're coming at me. And, they told me that I needed to get rid of this shit, and I did. And I'm socially awkward as can be anyways, even when I'm working a program. But it was a good balance between scared shitless and I had that wall up of don't hug me, don't talk to me. And I didn't know you guys hugged. I thought I was not going to do handshaking. And then I got here and you guys were hugging. So I learned to listen. I learned to take a little bit of direction. And the first direction I heard was, 90 meetings in 90 days. And I did the math, and that was like a meeting every day. So I knew I couldn't do that. And so I figured a couple times a week was legitimate. But I started to see a change in people. I started to see that, these weren't people who seemingly needed something from me, because that was always... Even coming here today, it was, I wavered back and forth between, I'm going to show you motherfuckers what recovery looks like, and I'm going to get up here and ruin this convention. And so and that's because I don't know what I have to offer. And all I have is my story, my experience, my strength, and my hope. But then, I didn't have anything to offer that I was willing to give anymore. I'd given it all up. And that was, since I was a little dude, that was the thing. If you had something to give, you had something, and you go to the dope house and you've got $3, it's not working. So I knew that from my childhood experience and growing up and seeking drugs and finding drugs and using drugs, that you always had to have something to give. And I was broken. I had nothing to give. So I started to see these principles, even though I didn't understand them or couldn't define them in a language that made sense. I saw the people that, they were selfless service. They glowed when they talked. They had something. They had a spark. They had a light. They had something I wanted. And they suggested I get phone numbers and call people. And that was probably one of the scarier things that I've done in my recovery. I called my first person, who is currently my sponsor. I think he sponsored me 4 times now. I've had 11 sponsors. I don't know, and that's 11 different sponsors. Several of them are repeats, so I don't count them in the numbers. I haven't got yet to my solid program of recovery that I've worked. Scared shitless going into meetings, and wasn't willing. I had my reservations right out of the gate. 10 minutes. I haven't even talked about sex yet. Well, shit. I called my first guy in recovery, and he told me what to do, told me where to go. I started having a little more faith in the process. Went to my first convention, and this, he's dead now, so I'm going to talk about him, but this guy in recovery who had brought, a lot of good things into my recovery. He told me, I couldn't go to the convention, I didn't have the money to come, and he told me about, he just said, come without money, they'll get you in. So I came, and he offered me an opportunity to do service, to get in the door, and it was another spiritual awakening. I believed in the principle of selfless service for that long, and he gave me the shirt, and he took me back, and this was someone willing to do something for me that I needed and couldn't do for myself. So he gave me the hugger shirt and took me back, and he rubbed his hand along my nipple. And I went, well, there it is. There's that thing. Everybody wants something. So that sucked. And if you're here today, someone who's just like him, get a program. Damn it, I have so much more. So my program is not one of solid recovery. I spent a whole lot of time clean, justifying a lot of criminal behavior. I did a whole lot of bad things clean because I had that solid justification of at least I'm not using. I live in a college town, and I rolled a lot of college students, did a whole lot of credit card fraud, a couple stick-ups. Oh, the great thing about being clean, I've been clean since December 31st, 2005. Thank you. This time, I was also going to talk about relapse, but apparently I don't have time. But the great thing about being clean that long is the statute of limitations is up on everything I've done, so you can tape this shit. I did a lot of bad stuff, did a whole lot of bad stuff clean, justified it, got back to that point that I couldn't stand myself. I just couldn't, every day I did things that compromised my principles. I didn't get to talk about principles at all. So I learned principles in recovery. I learned principles today. I learned how to apply those principles. I learned how to practice those principles. Things that I never have, the antidotes. The principles are the antidotes to my character defects. My character defects lead me to my shortcomings, which are things like armed robbery. Because I'm afraid. The core of my acting out is my fear. I'll never get enough. You'll never see me how I see myself. All my fears come down to my envy, my gluttony, my sloth, my ego, my anger. All these things that are the core of my disease, they come out in some little way, and I'm afraid. So I fill that hole with faith. I got so much I gotta say. I'm an atheist. If you're an atheist, you can do this shit too. Nobody cares about the particulars of your spiritual path, so keep it to yourself. You're violating traditions. What we do here is a spiritual program. It's not a dogma. So I figured out. Thank you. I figured out how to work this program around. It wasn't a resentment or reservation. It was my beliefs. I faked it until I made it, and it didn't work anymore. So I realized that I can, this program, which is the steps and the traditions, by the way, not meetings or vaping outside the meetings, I learned, thank you, I learned how to take what this program is, the spiritual principles, the service, the support of other men in recovery, and make that a power greater than myself. And that's my spirituality. So if you're struggling with that hang-up, you're welcome here too. And that was a big hang-up for me because when I read about that in this book, and when I read about that in the other fellowship I briefly went to, it was always things like, the agnostic and the atheist, you're welcome, blah, 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 but you'll get it. And so that's not what I wanted. I didn't want to take it on eventually. I wanted to be comfortable in my spiritual path. So I took a little hiatus from going to meetings, and my life got messy. It's still messy. I'm in the midst of my second recovery divorce, so that's fun. But it's really been an eye-opening experience and an opportunity for me to look at myself, or decide not to look at myself. And I've learned how to see the difference between applying a program and running from a program, or practicing a program and practicing disease. That's through awareness, that's through learning the principles of this recovery. I didn't have principles before, not just in my actions, but in the way I perceived the world, the way I applied anything on a continual basis. I acted on impulse, I acted on fear, and there's no better opportunity to do those things and sort through that shit than separating your things. So if you get that opportunity, work on that with a program instead of disease, because I spent a long time sitting in front of a drink twice since this started, and I used my program. I sat there and waited for that muscle memory to kick in, and I applied a program. I did what I was told. I called people, and they came and they dumped my shit out. Because I know where that's going. I don't have a drug of choice anymore, because my choice is this program, and anything I put in me that's going to give me that oblivion is absolutely going to lead right back. This is a progressive disease. It's a progressive recovery program, and I saw that when I went back out. I saw that in spades. I used hard and I used fast, and I came back in, and I wasn't the same person anymore. Sunken in eyes, and you could see my ribs through my coat. I was a mess. And I could have very easily gone that way with this. But long before that, that's just an excuse. Long before that, I stopped working a program. I would call guys on recovery sporadically. That's made up a word. My books got dusty, and I stopped working on myself, and so all those parts of myself that I was able to antidote with spiritual principles, they raged up in me, and they pushed everyone away, and they came out in all kinds of ways, and some of them positive. I'm a person with, like we all are. I've got a huge muse. I can focus my obsession and compulsions into something positive, but I don't make those decisions very well or often. So I lost sight of my program clean, and I would say a good 5-6 years I have not been working a program successfully to keep a lot of those negative things out of my life. They haven't led to me using, but I'm not plugged in like I should be. I'm not going to meetings like I should be. I'm working a program in that I'm applying the things that I learned, and I'm grateful for that, because there is no way that I would be staying clean if I didn't have this foundation of recovery that I worked so hard for. So I know I got to wrap it up, but when I first came in, I got in the Nazi sponsorship line, and we didn't kill gypsies, but we had a firm foundation of recovery that yours was not good enough. And those guys are sitting right there. But I needed this, and you might not, and I don't now. But what I needed was someone, a foot on your throat, do this or die, motherfucker, work the steps type of program. The steps are our solution, and I needed that. I needed someone. My sponsor, if I missed a call, he said, "Here's $20, go get one." And I needed that shit. I needed somebody who didn't take my shit, because I'm a master manipulator. I can justify and rationalize anything, and that included, despite the desperation, it included being willing to not do the things, the stand in the corner on my head stuff. I wasn't willing to do those things when it really came down to it. I'm not writing a step. I'm not writing a 4-step. I'm not admitting shit, and I've never written a 4-step that was searching and thorough. I haven't. There's whole chapters of things that I've never put on paper. There's handfuls of things that I've never shared with anyone, and that's not going to do me any favors. So I know I need to plug back in and work on these things. That's my message. I mean, I certainly don't work a perfect program, but I didn't want to get up here and lie. I have to tell the truth about where I am and what I'm doing. So, I was going to close by reading something. That's what I got. 20 minutes left. if you haven't read this Living Clean book, it's amazing. When I was out not doing meetings, they came out with this, and I found it, and it's a spiritual awakening for me. I got goosebumps and chubbies. Okay. All right, quiet down. Okay. So this is from Living Clean. So the more progress that we continue to recognize in ourselves and our fellows, the more we know is possible. What first appeared to us as a way out now offers us a way into life, into a life we hadn't imagined, into joy, into hope, into growth that never stops. We continue to get better. We continue to discover new ways to live, new freedom, new paths to explore. We travel together as one in fellowship, and we pave the roads as we walk it for all those who may follow. No matter how far we may have come and how far we know we have to go, when we live clean, the journey continues. That's what I got.